Imagine walking down a bustling street only to be banned from sight simply because of how you look. This isn't a dystopian novel. It's the disturbing history of the ugly laws. These laws didn't just vanish. Their echoes still reverberate in modern society, influencing how we perceive and treat those with disabilities. From the harsh realities of the ugly laws to the subtle biases in film portrayals, our views on disability have been shaped by both history and Hollywood. It's time to confront and change the lens through which we see disability. Opinion: a view, judgment, or appraisal formed in the mind about a particular matter. Approval, esteem, belief stronger than impression and less strong than positive knowledge, a generally held view. Perception: a result of perceiving, a mental image. Awareness of the elements of environment through physical sensation. Physical sensation interpreted in the light of experience. Opinion refers to a belief, view, or judgment. It is what you think. In contrast, perception is the way you think. This is the key difference between opinion and perception. What you think is always shaped by the way you see and understand. After reading a post by Disabled Hikers, a group that I follow, I looked up a book titled The Ugly Laws by Susan M. Schwick. One of the very first pictures in that book is from the Cleveland Cripple Survey. And there was a man in it who was very well dressed, and he was smiling. And he was driven off the streets by the Unsightly Beggar Ordinance of 1916. So this reasonably looking okay guy is what I saw. But he was a casualty of that law. And one of the objectives of that ordinance was to abolish all street obstructions. And we're not talking about things, we're talking about human beings. And the ordinance was passed and read, any person who is diseased, maimed, mutilated, or in any way deformed so as to be unsightly or disgusting object, or an improper person to be allowed in or on the streets, highways, thoroughfares, or public places in this city shall not, therein or thereon, expose himself to public view, under the penalty of a fine of $1, which in today's standards would be around $20 for each offense. And this was from the Chicago City Code of 1881. And this was still not the earliest instance of the ugly law, so to speak. In 1867 in San Francisco, a former Union soldier was arrested as being half demented. He'd been wounded in the war, and which left him paralyzed, which was described as being a perfect wreck. And in this first ordinance, it was supposed to prevent begging in the streets and to prohibit certain people from appearing in the streets and public places. And it was written as diseased, maimed, mutilated, or in any way deformed in San Francisco. So all the way back in 1867. So you can go back further still, and in London, England, in 1729, it was a suggestion that whippings, workhouses, and the establishment of a national institution for receiving and confining people who were in the street trying to extort money, which is what they thought of begging. The proposal that was read in part as, if any person is born with any defect or deformity or maimed by fire or by any inveterate distemper which renders them miserable objects, their way is open to London, where they have free liberty of showing their nauseous sights to terrify people and force them to give money to get rid of them. Now, what's interesting about this attitude is that it hasn't disappeared, and instead it's just been given a gentler, more caring sort of tone. And that is that the police and health professionals are being protective of us, or those of us with disabilities. And in no way am I justifying bad or illegal behavior or acts. What I question is the how and the why of the choices made by so-called professionals. So some examples for you to consider are things like Frances Farmer. She was an actress in the 1930s and 40s, and she withdrew from a film in 1939 due to struggles with depression and binge drinking. In 1942, there were reports of her supposed erratic behavior and subsequent arrests and committals to various psychiatric institutions, and she was diagnosed as a paranoid schizophrenic and was involuntarily committed at the request of members of her family, especially her mother. And she remained in the institution until 1950, 8 years later. When she was discharged, she tried to restart her career, but it never had the same momentum. In 2016, in Lunenburg County, Nova Scotia, there was an inquiry initiated due to the RCMP's use of a taser and other questionable tactics in the arrest of a disabled veteran, where one of the officers cited the Involuntary Psychiatric Act of Nova Scotia as justification. The very first guiding principle of the Act is persons of all ages with mental disorders are entitled to be treated with dignity and respect. The veteran, well, he told the RCMP that he had a metal implant in him in order to control electrodes that were attached to his spine, and that tasering him could kill him. Okay. He suffered from chronic pain. And along with the implant, he was a medical marijuana user and required a stair lift as well as a power lift recliner to assist with daily living. And they were paid in part by Veterans Canada. The officers still felt that he was combative and that he had tried to strike them, one of them, and he was tased, handcuffed behind his back, and sat on the floor with no support. Okay. I've included a final example with a link in the description to a YouTube video that some of you may find disturbing. It is about the experience of a young man with autism at a police holding facility. So please consider that before watching it. This is the link, and you will find it in the description. Code of the Freaks is a documentary from 2020 that discusses how disabled people are represented in film. It points out that regardless of the plot of the movie, they're pretty much all the same story, one of inspiration. The people, or persons with disabilities, experience something, whether that is a medical intervention like a lobotomy, as in Frances, a 1982 film about Frances Farmer, where the doctors diagnose and cure Frances's mental health issues and she becomes normal again. Or overcoming or triumphing over their disability, as in Charlie, a 1968 film based on a 1958 science fiction story, Flowers for Algernon. Charlie has an intellectual disability, and doctors fix that through brain surgery that triples his IQ. But it doesn't last. Think about films like Radio, Midnight Cowboy, and Rain Man. In these films, the disabled character's story provides the able-bodied characters with the opportunity to become a better person, to better understand that, a disability is not a bad thing. That still people, all of these wonderful, inspiring stories. Another issue that Code of the Freaks talks about is about authentic representation of disability in films. Now, we know that Patty Duke was not blind, deaf, or mute when she played Helen Keller in The Miracle Worker. In 1994, Leonardo DiCaprio was a Best Supporting Actor nominee for portraying a developmentally disabled person in What's Eating Gilbert Grape. And in 1995, Tom Hanks won Best Actor for his portrayal of Forrest Gump. Other actors who have portrayed disabled characters in film include Jake Gyllenhaal, Bryan Cranston, Sally Hawkins, Audrey Hepburn, Daniel Day-Lewis, Al Pacino, Jamie Foxx, Sir John Mills, Marlee Matlin, Holly Hunter, Jon Voight, Tom Cruise, Gary Sinise, Joanne Woodward, Cliff Robertson, Dustin Hoffman, Anthony Hopkins, Harold Russell, Jodie Foster, Jessica Lange, Brad Pitt, Edward Norton, Angelina Jolie, Julie Christie, Michael Shannon, Bradley Cooper, and Julia Roberts. Two of those names that I mentioned are actually people who identify as disabled. When you consider that the movies can be the primary exposure to disability for most able-bodied people, authentic representation takes on more importance because it can reinforce the belief that moviegoers have gained a full knowledge of what it is like to be disabled, to have cerebral palsy or autism spectrum, or to be blind or deaf. Movies are absolutely entertainment. A way to get away from the real world and escape for a couple of hours. And I love to watch movies. Really engrossing, great stories, great acting ones. I've watched Children of a Lesser God over and over and over again. Marlee Matlin won an Oscar for her role in that movie. Marlee Matlin is deaf. I've watched Ray twice. Jamie Foxx does a wonderful job. He really does, as Ray Charles. But I know he can see, and that sits between me and truly enjoying the film. And that is the important part of it, is that there is a disconnect. If you truly wish to be entertained and get into the story and understand what it is. There was a story that I read about Daniel Day-Lewis and his performance in My Left Foot. And during his time making the film, he spent all of his time in a wheelchair. He decided not to get out of it and to keep on going. He felt it was the one thing that he could do that was a sign of respect to the other performers in the film who all had cerebral palsy. And so he never got out of that chair. And when the Oscars rolled around, or an awards ceremony, anyway, and he got up and he walked up onto the stage to accept the award. And I have to wonder, what sort of honor was that to the people in the film who couldn't walk and who could never have done what he did? And he was accepting an award for playing someone who couldn't do what he just did. That's what that means. That's what it is. So now I have 3 movies that I'd like you to try. And one of them is Me Before You. Now this movie has a character called Louisa Clark, and she's hired to care for Will Traynor. And Will was a successful banker, and he was active in all kinds of sports. But he became a tetraplegic after being hit by a motorcycle. Now, Will is fairly turned off inside, but Louisa is a very outgoing, very bubbly sort of person, and it's hoped that when she is hired as his caregiver, that she can maybe bring him around. And Will's decided that he's going to go to Switzerland for a medically assisted death because he cannot live a disabled life. But he is encouraging Louisa to live her absolute best life, live with zest. And he makes sure that he sets her up for all of those things. The next movie is Dog. This dog is so beautiful. Oh my goodness. But it is a story of a former U.S. Army Ranger, Jackson, who is suffering from PTSD. And he doesn't want to suffer from PTSD. And he applies to go back, but he's deemed unfit for service, and he has a brain injury that backs that up. So Jackson is notified that his partner was killed in a car crash, and that he is required to take his friend's military dog to the service, to the memorial service, and then afterwards to take him and let him be put to sleep. The dog is also suffering from PTSD, and it's an interesting story to watch. Channing Tatum stars in it, and he also directed it. It's a good film, but you will see there too the inspirational aspect of it. The last film I'd like to talk about is really, I guess, a movie for children, but it is a good film all in itself, and it's called The Butterfly Tale. And in it, there is, it's all about the monarch butterfly migration, and Patrick is a teenage butterfly with only one full wing, and Patrick can't fly in the way that all butterflies fly. And so by the leader of the monarch butterflies, the leader of the migration, and his mom, he is supposed to be left behind to be in charge of taking care of the milkweed plants until they return from their migration, and he doesn't want to be. He wants to go. We also have Jennifer, who is a butterfly that is afraid of heights, and she is going to be pulling the emergency arc of food rations in case they don't come into things. And there is a caterpillar that has yet to turn into a monarch, but he's almost there, and he is very hungry. He's a very hungry fellow. He's got hollow legs, I believe, and he likes to eat the milkweed, but he decides to go with Patrick because they're friends as they stow away on the migration, and also because he has a crush on a monarch butterfly named Lily. It is a film that can honestly bring about some great conversations between parents and children on disability, what inclusion really means, and how celebrating differences makes us better.